Hello and welcome to my final presentation on Ibogaine. Well, let's start on the left side. The origin of Ibogaine, it comes from West Africa. Let me go and zoom in. So if you can see a little better now, the Tabernath Iboga is the real phylogenetic name for the plant. It's a shrub and it's native to West Africa. It's very associated with a religion called Bwiti. This Bwiti is practiced commonly in the Cameroon and Congo Republic, where this plant is commonly found. The molecule can be seen right below it. It's mostly a hydrocarbon. So as you may be able to see, there's an indole unit in Ibogaine itself. That is a product from the shikimate pathway. Starting from shikimic acid, you can see its synthesis in some abbreviated steps. Something else interesting I noted in the synthesis of this natural product was it actually includes another natural product in the synthesis of Ibogaine called secologanin, which is actually not formed through the shikimate pathway. Instead, it's formed from the acetate pathway. After going through the synthesis of all the steps and all, the most interesting part to me was the coupling of the secologanin to the tryptophan unit in such a way that created a really interesting hydrocarbons on the right side of the molecule. These hydrocarbons in a way really define Ibogaine from any other similar indole alkaloids because it's just this complex set of hydrocarbons. Because there's so many carbons in the molecule itself and not too many nitrogens or oxygens in between, it's a fairly lipophilic compound, having a log P of 3.65. This makes it available in the oral form. In terms of distribution, this is kind of an interesting thing in that the volume of distribution will be very large because the molecule will be able to penetrate through your fat and as well as the blood-brain barrier. Evidence of Ibogaine crossing the blood-brain barrier can be seen because the effect is felt and the neurotransmitter receptors that do enact this effect are in your brain, so therefore it must cross the blood-brain barrier in order to enact effect, which is felt. There is definitely the presence of the first pass effect when it comes to taking Ibogaine. Ibogaine is subsequently metabolized into noribogaine after phase 1 metabolism. This can be seen through blood concentration studies that I've read. So noribogaine is the phase 1 metabolite of Ibogaine. The only difference is this O used to be a O methyl, now it's just OH. This metabolism is carried out by the CYP, specifically the CYP 2D6. This is found in the liver, and that's where most of the metabolization takes place. Anyways, noribogaine has been detected in blood serum within 15 minutes of oral administration of the drug, proving that the first pass effect is for sure there and having an effect on the drug. To me, the most interesting part of Ibogaine was the mechanism of action. It is said to enact itself across 11 different neuroreceptor transmitters, meaning it will have a very wide and broad effect on the brain. Of these 11 neurotransmitters, I covered 2. It had been shown in the study that the Ibogaine itself had affinity for the opioid receptor, the mu opioid receptor specifically, and because of that, it should have analgesic effects. But because it doesn't, which is perplexing, and it could be said that it's just an agonist for the receptor. Despite being an agonist, you could say that there's no Q effect, and therefore there's no effect enacted on the body. The next one I covered was serotonin. Serotonin and Ibogaine both share a indole unit in them, which constitutes that they would bind to the same things because of their structural similarity. Therefore, it could be said that, in the studies that I read, Ibogaine was said to bind to this serotonin transporter, which would reuptake serotonin itself into the cleft, maintaining smaller levels of serotonin in the cleft. But in the absence of serotonin transporter, there would be a buildup of serotonin, and it would act similar to an SSRI in the presence in the brain. To characterize how people feel in Ibogaine, they compare it to something like a trip on shrooms or acid. It's similar to that, but it also includes a lot of vomiting throughout the duration of the 10-hour trip. Sorry for skipping around here, but when it comes to excretion, most is done within the whole day for humans, more so than rats actually. And it gets kind of tricky to track all of the metabolism of Ibogaine because most of it is turned into noribogaine really quickly, and that can stay in your bloodstream for about 96 hours. So the main reason that people take Ibogaine that I haven't really spoke upon yet is to interrupt dependence upon a drug, as if to break addiction. So many people that are opiate addicts will look to Ibogaine as nearly a final resort to break their addiction and change their life. And I found a study measuring how long it took people to return to drugs after doing an Ibogaine session. So there were 41 people in the sample size, and 8 people needed 2 treatments, and 1 person needed 3 treatments. And that adds up to 52 total treatments. And you can see group 1 in the data, they returned to drug using in about 2 months. Group 2 took about 2 to 6 months to return to drugs. Group 3, between 6 months and a year. And then group 4, they lasted greater than a year without drugs. So, I mean, it is somewhat promising in that it did interrupt dependence for a while, but really not that long. I wish I could say there were better studies out there for learning the effects of Ibogaine, but there were really not too many long-term studies when it came to Ibogaine, and this is really the only one I could find. And it says it works for a little bit, but it doesn't really say it works for long for anyone. Alright, so this documentary is, it's a Vice documentary about Ibogaine that follows one person. His name is Matt. He's addicted to heroin before the documentary starts, and he still is. And then his mother, like last resort, takes his son to these people who claim to break addiction for people that are addicted to opiates. And they take him to Mexico because it's not illegal, or it's illegal to do Ibogaine in America. It's a Schedule 1. And then when in Mexico, they start doing buiti ceremonies with Matt and another person who's supposed to take the drug as well. But ultimately that night they get ready to take the Ibogaine, and then Matt takes it. He starts throwing up a lot, and he's like tripping. And the next day he just describes his journey. And the day after that, he really seems like a changed man, which is really just the point of the documentary, to make it seem like Ibogaine changes a man. I first saw this documentary when I was like 15, and it really made me think like, wow, this is the potential of this drug. Like, it really works and it's forever, because that's the way they portrayed it. They made it seem like Matt was cured of his addiction forever. But really, it's not true. As you can see, it can interrupt addiction, but based on the study we just read, it does not really permanently break addiction. It does come from the bark of the root, which is described in the documentary, and it also does come in the powder form before it's drank, as the documentary says. The documentary claims that the second they take the dose of Ibogaine, that they will not have any more withdrawals to the opiates. Couldn't find any papers detailing the details of that, but I mean, it could be possible. I don't really know. So something I forgot to cover was the toxicity. I read about studies in rats, or mice specifically, excuse me. The ED50 was found to be 12 mg per kg when given systemically. Similarly, the LD50 for mice was when given systemically, was 327 mg per kg. Because these values are pretty far apart, we got a high therapeutic index of 27.25 mg per kg. To wrap up my presentation, I want to talk about my thoughts about the drug. Ever since I watched the documentary when I was a kid, I really believed in the power of Ibogaine, to be honest. I never intended on taking it or becoming a drug addict, but I always thought that it was a very powerful drug that would break dependence permanently when you were addicted to a drug. But I learned that's not really the case at all, based on the studies I read. I mean, it could last 2 months, and for most people, but not very long. I didn't realize how in-depth the mechanism of action would be, considering there's 12 receptors enacted, and that would enact a very broad range of effects on people. I feel like because I dug deeper into the mechanism of action, I only became more confused in the amount of details that are listed in the mechanism of action. But ultimately, it is still a very interesting drug to me.